My name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jenna. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello. Welcome to a special edition of the series. Welcome to series number 7, my friends. Yes, we've done this 7 times, where I usually reread the first book of a series that I have read and then finally continue with the series and finish it, whether that is a duology or a trilogy. But this time, we are not only dealing with a bigger series, we're dealing with 4 books. I am not only rereading book 1, but I am also rereading book 2. So I have gotten halfway through this series in my life. And when my lovely friend Hannah picked the 3rd book of this series for my Friends Pick My TBR, which is this monthly TBR thing that I do every February and July, is currently the middle of February, so I'm in the middle of it. When she picked the 3rd book of this series for me to do, I sat there with myself for a few good minutes and I was like, yeah, okay, we're gonna need to reread book 1 and 2 to be able to do this, because I don't remember enough about this series to go on with book 3. And so, my friends, I did not stack these properly. Let's see if I can do that right now. We are reading The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. So we're going to be rereading Eragon and Eldest, and then diving into Brisingr and then Inheritance after the fact. Welcome to said vlog. This is a beloved fantasy series that has dragons. It's young adult, middle grade, young adult, I think is a better description for this. Let me put you down. I can feel the pages bending into my neck, which is fine because the book itself is kind of falling apart anyways. But yeah, so this is a beloved childhood favorite from a lot of people. I did not read this when I was a kid, which is baffling to me because dragons. But as a kid, I was very, very obsessed with a certain boy wizard. And at the time, nothing else compared. So it put me in a years-long reading slump, and I missed out on a lot of fantastic books, including the Percy Jackson series, which I read in high school and then finally finished after university ended. This was one of these books as well that I ended up picking up after university. So I read it for the first time as an adult, but it has been many years since I read this one for the first time. And I cannot tell you a thing that happens in either of these other than the fact that we have Eragon, a boy in a village in this first one, who finds a dragon egg and starts raising the dragon, and then ends up going on a quest with this guy named Murtagh, who now has a book of his own. I should clarify, I am not going to be doing the Murtagh book in this either. This is just going to be the core 4 of the Inheritance Cycle, because that is what was originally released. This is a core story. We're good with that. That's okay. And I'm good with this. And eventually I'll probably read Murtagh, probably because I'll be so in love with it, I'll have to. So anyways, but yes, that is all I really remember. Quest has like high elves and dwarves and dragons and stuff like that. It's very Lord of the Ringsy. Christopher Paolini started writing this when he was like 15 years old. And I know he's become a much better writer, but from what I remember, I enjoyed this a lot. So we're gonna see if it stands up to the test of time. And whether, as a more critical reader, I still enjoy the series. In fact, love it. But like dragons, I can't go wrong. It's also a young adult series, so I don't love young adult anymore. But we're gonna see if I still love this. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Oh my goodness. It's a few days later. I've officially wrapped my reread of Eragon. Oh my God, what a great time this was. I thrived. All right, so I started this audiobook when I was making dinner a couple days ago, or I guess on the weekend. Is that when I started this? Yeah, on the weekend. And it's one of those things where I was like, oh my God, whoever this narrator is, I've listened to him before. Like, he just seems so nostalgic, and he just feels like home, whoever this narrator is. I even went so far to look up his backlist and like catalog of books. I haven't listened to any other books except for the Eragon books voiced by him, the audiobook narrator. So I don't know why he just feels so comforting and so nostalgic to me, because like I didn't read Eragon as a kid. So my journey with Eragon is, I think I read it for the first time. I was definitely working at my job, because I remember listening to the audiobook when I was sitting at my desk when I was in office. I don't really remember what year specifically, but I guess that could only really be 2019, or it could only really be 2019 because I started work in 2019 and then 2020 was the pandemic. So I guess it was 2019. I don't really remember, but so there's that. So I read Eragon for the first time, and I remember just falling so in love with it. And I think I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it. Valid. Homegirl rated things just on vibes. Homegirl, aka me from years ago. Just vibes, you know? Which is a fantastic way to rate things, in my opinion. But now that I'm a more critical reader and I want to just be more brain when I'm rating things, because I find like, especially when I'm like freshly done reading a book, I will rate something like 5 stars immediately. And then like a couple weeks pass and I think back on it and I'm like, that wasn't a 5 star, that was like a 4 star maybe. Maybe it was like 3.5. So I got better at my rating system and started using Compile back in 2021. And Compile is the rating system from G at Book Roast. So like my reading is more well thought out, you know, and I'm more critical of what I read. And I have, as I mentioned in my last series video, I have read more widely, and especially in the fantasy genre, and I know what I like now. I've gotten better at the craft of writing, and like know so much more about like creating stories and stuff because I'm an author now, right? Like I know this, and so much so that I've like ruined books for myself because I like am able to tell what the authors are doing with like the structure of what it's a whole thing. When I originally read Eragon, I was going in just for vibes, and I came out with just vibes of absolutely loving this and being so shocked at how nuanced and how, maybe not nuanced, nuance isn't the right word, but like how rich and well thought out this series was. And just how brilliantly done it was. And I think what really compounded that opinion of it was that Christopher Paolini wrote this when he was like 15 years old. Like, he was a teenager when he became a New York Times bestseller. He was 19, it says in the back here. Also, this copy is so old. It has a win ticket to the premiere of the movie. I forgot they made a movie of this. But yeah, Christopher Paolini became a New York Times best-selling author at 19 years old, which is bananas. Like, in his little like author note at the very back, his acknowledgements, he like thanks his mom and dad for being his editors and like helping him with it. I'm like, this is so sweet. Like, he was just a teenager when he was writing this. I think the first time I read this, I was really like blown away that a teenager could write something like this. It was absolutely incredible, and it still is an incredible book. And the fact that he was so young when he was writing these books, and they're really good. Like, coming out of the reread, it is a 5-star experience of a read, you know? I had so much fun reading this. Objectively, not a 5-star book, but like subjectively 5 stars. Just because I had such a great time. Well, it's not actually 5 stars, just an enjoyment, I should say. An enjoyment, it is a 5-star because it was just so wonderfully nostalgic. And I think that's what I really liked about this book the first time I read it as well, because it just reminded me how much I like of that feeling I would get when I read books as a kid, even though I didn't read this specifically when I was a kid. I don't know why. I would have eaten it up. But yeah, it gives me the nostalgic vibes that I really love about high fantasy. And this go around, I was having the funniest time, not even the hardest time, the funniest time just diving into this book and realizing different plot elements that are pulled directly from Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time. Like, so much so that there's an entire sequence in here with Eragon having his father figure injured. He lives really far away from the town with his uncle and his cousin. In this attack that happens, he finds his uncle like really injured and drags him all the way to the village for help, for like medical help. And in my head, I'm like, okay, great. Like, his uncle survives. I remember this so specifically. His uncle survives, I was remembering the Wheel of Time, the first book of the Wheel of Time, because that is an exact plotline from the Wheel of Time, because homie's uncle does not survive. And I was just like, oh my god, what? Anyways, that is a very low spoiler, so sorry about that. But yeah, it was such a genuinely lovely time, and like the ending had me like fist pumping here on the couch yet again. Because my memory is shit and I don't remember a lot of things, I did remember the general trajectory of this. How could you forget? It's a quest narrative, right? Like, he finds a dragon egg and loses his whole family and all this kind of stuff, and then has to go on a quest because he's like originally it's like a quest for revenge. He's got this guy helping him who's like his mentor and his father figure and all this kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And so I knew like the trajectory of it, and I knew that he eventually makes it to this one place. Do I remember anything in the middle? No, because it's all adventure, it's all travel, right? I loved it though. I love this book. It is fantastic. The writing is shit in many places because the man was 15 years old or something when he was writing this. The writing is overdone. He is trying so hard, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm sure Christopher Paolini could look back on as an adult man that he is now with kids, and he would want to fix so many sentences in here, because like now that I am a writer myself, I was holding myself back from editing this book as I was reading it. I was just trying to enjoy the experience because there's a lot of writing in here that it just isn't great. Valid though, because homie was 15 years old and it was a debut novel and all this kind of stuff, and it like it's meant for kids, right? So it's not the same highbrow like Lord of the Rings level writing or even Wheel of Time writing, even though you can tell he is so influenced by these big fantasy books. Like I bet you baby Christopher Paolini was sitting there at his little desk in his childhood room with a stack of old Wheel of Time books in front of him and a beat up copy of Lord of the Rings and just like pulling direct like influence from them. Like I love him for it because this series is going to be a series that I give to my kids before I give them Lord of the Rings, and like this is like going to be their stepping stone into adult high fantasy. Or not even adult high fantasy, just high fantasy in general, because it is fabulously well done. And it is so, like, for what it is, you know? Fabulously well done for what it is. I enjoyed the hell out of this. I don't know what I'm going to rate it now that, like, I've done it and it's a reread and whatever, and I'm a more critical reader, so I'm going to be rating this in my normal compile system, but just know that this was a 5-star in enjoyment. I loved every second of this book. Dragons! Dragons! The inheritance cycle starts with a boy named Eragon who is like 15 years old. He is going hunting one day in the forest where like no one in his village goes because they're all like, it's so danger, why? No one comes back alive. And he's like, bet I do all the time, calm down. When he's there, he ends up finding a dragon egg, and he thinks it's just a really beautiful stone because it is, like, it's a perfectly polished stone that is a shade of blue and has like white going through it, like white veins going through it, and he's just like, this is beautiful, it's gonna come for a lot of money, and he needs money, his family needs money, and he tries to sell it a number of places but no one will really take it, and then he kind of, because it's from this like spooky forest place, and then one night he hears loud noises and he notices that the egg that the stone that he has sitting on his shelf is like moving and shaking, and it's making a lot of noises, and it cracks open and there's a dragon inside. And so he takes it upon himself to raise this little beautiful little dragon and hides it away in the forest and raises Saphira and learns more about dragons by like questioning the town storyteller and all this kind of stuff. And then shit hits the fan when the people who were originally chasing Saphira's egg come to town looking for the egg. Shit hits the fan, his farm is destroyed, his uncle is dead, his cousin is gone on a job so he doesn't even know, and Eragon decides to just leave with Saphira and Brom, who is the storyteller, and exact revenge on the creatures that hurt and killed his uncle. And that sets us off on the quest that is Eragon. It's just such a wonderful narrative of this boy who makes very, very, like, simultaneously very adult decisions and also very childish decisions. Like, he is so much a kid that, like, it doesn't surprise me at all that that like Christopher Paolini was a teenager when he was writing this, and it's so evident in the way that he characterizes Eragon, because Eragon is exactly what a 15-year-old kid would be doing. Like, he is spot on for characterization. And I feel like that was probably just a self-insert for Christopher Paolini at the time. Like, who wouldn't want, at the age of like 15, 16 years old, to be writing a fantasy book and like put yourself as the main character, right? It's perfect. Like, the decisions that Eragon is making are, they make me laugh and also go, oh, my son. Like, I just want to like hug you close and like keep you safe and stuff. I love it so much. So much. And there's so much like depth and layers to the world building. Like, the imagination that Christopher Paolini has to be able to create this, even though he's like extremely heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time. I just think this is fabulous. This is a fabulous fantasy book, and I think it holds up so Well, I'm so excited to keep going with this and reread the next book because I don't remember much about it. I remember like little things, and I know that we get to meet someone else with the dragon, which is fantastic. I also, coming out of this, forgot who Murtagh was. I thought Murtagh was who Brom is in here. So now that I know who Murtagh is, I'm interested in the Murtagh book. I'm not gonna lie. Because I want to know what it is about. Like, is it a prequel? I don't remember. Well, I guess we'll find out. Now we have Eldest on the docket. Hello, friends. It has been a hot second since I last chatted with you, and I almost forgot to update you partway through my reread of Eldest. So I'm currently on page 419, and I have plans to finish this book tonight, which is fantastic, amazing. Man, there's something about these books, you know? They just have such a nostalgia to them, and they just hit, you know? Let me see if I could put you down. I have really enjoyed this reread, almost more than Eragon, even though I think I enjoyed the story of Eragon more than I'm enjoying the story in Eldest, because I'm a sucker for a good old quest novel. This, I think I'm enjoying the rereading experience more because this is a true, like, I don't remember a damn thing about this book going in. Like, I knew vaguely that we follow both Eragon and Roran. We follow the two cousins, I guess. And we're getting the Carvajal story as well as Eragon's story as he's going to Elismira and getting the training and stuff. But there's so, like, that's literally all I remembered. There's so many details in this book that I forget. Truly, like, I am page like 418 and there's so many little things and like big plot things that I just completely forgot about. I thought I had a good idea of the Roran and Carvajal story in my head. It was completely wrong. I don't know what I was thinking of. I don't know what storyline was in my head. I forgot about Eragon's injury that's left him disabled. I don't know how Christopher Paolini is going to handle that. Because if he solves Eragon's injury with magic, I'm gonna be a little mad. But because that's like, it's a little distasteful fixing a disability with magic for many reasons. But I guess so far I can say he's done pretty well because like no one has had the perfect magic fix for the injury and Eragon is just dealing with it and he's just living with the consequences of it. The poor boy is being run ragged because of it, because he's not being given any special treatment because of it. Like he's not, you know, being pulled from training or doing anything less than he would be if he was completely able-bodied. He's just being pushed through it, and that is causing him severe physical pain, and it's also causing him a lot of mental anguish because he's like a 15-year-old boy. Like, he's just trying his hardest, and he's such a sweetie. Oh, he's such a teenager. It's so funny. Yeah, I also thought there was gonna be more dragon-y stuff in this book than there has been. I mean, I do have all of this left to go, so there could be more. But yeah, I am very much enjoying this reread. And again, the audiobook narrator is just so good. His voice is perfect for these books. It is genuinely such a comforting, soft read. Not the actual book itself, just the vibes. You know, the vibes are warm, soft, comforting. And I'm really excited to see where this goes because I was actually talking to Julie previously. Julie reads on Instagram. She was saying that this is one of her favorite series. And I told her, I was like, I have managed to go throughout my life on the internet, one, not having been spoiled for anything from Eragon, and two, just like, I don't even, like, people just barely talk about this series. And I think having been on the internet for so long and being in the bookish space for so long and seeing and getting spoiled for a lot of like Rick Riordan books, a lot of those childhood books were spoiled for me. I mean, I grew up reading Harry Potter, so I wasn't spoiled for anything in there. I read a lot of like the OG series and stuff from being a kid. Just being on the internet, you're spoiled for a lot of stuff that's happened in books because people just aren't careful. I have never been spoiled for anything that's happened in Eragon or Eldest or Brisingr or Inheritance. Not a damn thing. I do not know where this story is going to go. I have zero idea of what this series is from here. And that makes me so excited because it's been I don't know what it is. Like, it genuinely pleases me that a book series that is so quintessential to so many people's like
childhoods and like grew up with this series and that kind of stuff. Like I get to experience that too, even though I am an adult, and I get to experience it as though I'm a kid again, reading these books for the first time, because as a kid, I knew nothing about books that I was reading, right? I was just reading them because of my friend was reading them, or I just saw a pretty cover, you know? Like all this stuff, all these books that I were spoiled. What am I trying to say? There's something to say about like online culture and the spoiling of stories, that like just being online, and even not even spoiling stories, just like the way that some people talk about books and pitch books. Honestly, it's like a wide range of anything out there. The way that people talk about books, even the way that I talk about books, I often sometimes say too much, and I do spoil for people who have not read the books. And I think that this culture that we live in is absolutely fantastic, especially with the amount of book recommendations that we all get, and like the absolutely incredibly diverse amount of stories that you get that you are exposed to as a part of this community. But there's something real special about getting into a book series or a book or something that you've not really heard anything about. Like I know that this series is absolutely beloved, but getting into a book series that you only know the hook for, which is just a boy finds a dragon egg and goes on a quest, essentially, which is all I really knew about Eragon before I read it for the first time. It's so special to be able to do that, I think. To find a book that like not really anyone has talked about, or to find a book in a bookstore, like pick one up and read it without having heard anyone talk about it or looked at any reviews online, and to kind of create your own opinion about it. I think it's really nice to do every once in a while. Granted, I love this community, and I love just the way that we can talk about books and recommend books and find more stories that we might not have ever found just by existing in our own little worlds, you know? So a weird little diatribe halfway through this, but yeah. The reread of Eldest is going really well. I am loving it. One thing that I've kind of thought about this weekend, because this weekend is the weekend that I read the entirety of The Shadow of What Was Lost. I decided to take a break from this chunky high fantasy and read this chunky high fantasy as the break, because I don't know why. But I think doing that really like clarified why I would do something like that to me. And it's a weird little thing. It's a weird little thing. And it's not necessarily a critique of these books, but it kind of is. And it's more of like the pacing of this giant tome was unreal. It was plotted so well. And it was breakneck speed, didn't let me go. I read 500 and some pages in like one sitting. I could not put this book down. I just like, this was my break from reading this book, because this book, it might be an after effect of having to listen to the audiobook slower than I'm used to listening to audiobooks at, because I'm a heathen and I listen to audiobooks at like 3 times speed if I can, especially younger reader books, because they're automatically just like narrated a little slower. So I think that's part of it, the fact that I can't listen to this audiobook very fast, and it feels like it's taking me forever to get through it because of that, because I can only devote a couple hours every night to it. But I think what the main thing is that the pacing, the first 2 books of this series just isn't perfect. I think that's what it is. Like, it's a really good story and it moves pretty well and there is always something going on, but there's downtime and it kind of lags in some places. And I feel like the actual like plot structure of book 1 and book 2 is not well done to be like a concise, nice story arc with book 1 and then a nice, concise story arc with book 2. Like, it needed a little bit of finagling and a little bit of tweaking. But that's not to say that the plot isn't also just fine. Like, it's doing fine. But I think that's what I've noticed now as a more critical reader. And I think that is helpful for me as a writer too, because it helps me see, like, you guys have been around on my channel for a while and you've watched some of my writing content. The pacing and plotting of a story is some of the most important stuff that you have to deal with. There's a lot of difference between doing those outlines and plotting and stuff for a cozy fantasy novel, which are the 2 novels that I have out, and then an actual like high fantasy novel, which is something that I do want to eventually be the majority of what I publish and what I write is high fantasy. So having this experience this weekend and reading this really high octane, just intense, literally no minutes to stop and breathe book, even though it is a doorstop, it was my like palate cleanser book to take a little bit of a break from reading Eldest. Doing that, I think seeing the pacing and the plotting difference is just making me also like more aware and a better writer. Anyways, that's a random little diatribe that I had to mention, of course. But yes, I have less than half of the book to go. I'm going to finish it tonight. We're going to dive in. I think there's 4 hours left of the audiobook to go. It is just after 9, so that should bring me right to about 1 or 1:30 in the morning, which is pretty standard for me. So I'll let you know how I feel about the ending of this book, because I don't remember a damn thing about this book from here on out. So let's find out how it goes. Oh, what an ending. Oh my god. I don't know if you guys are the same or feel similarly, but I don't know what it is about war in books. Big battle scenes, they just get me. Some of the one-liners had me crying. Oh, I love it so much. This was so good. Oh, my comment still stands from earlier though about the plot being a little bit draggy in places, because a lot of this is just Eragon and Eldest learning, and there's a lot to handle. But I really enjoy what Christopher Paolini did, knitting in Roran's storyline to like accompany it. So it kind of kept things moving. It kept a little interest going, you know, all that good stuff. But oh my god, also this book must be a really old copy. This specific version was printed in 2005. Oh, this is 2007. Okay, 2007 first paperback version. Does anyone know? I'm gonna have to do my research about this. It says book 2 in the Inheritance trilogy. It said somewhere that this was the second of a trilogy, and I was like, no, sorry, it's not. What's happening? When did they make the decision to make it 4? Also, I really want to read Murtagh now. The book Murtagh, because oh my god, I'm actually really glad that I didn't remember a lot of what happened in this book, because that just made this reading experience so much more fun and so much more like awe-inspiring at the end, because there's just so many things that happen in that last battle. Like, I don't even know, man. I started crying on page 627 when Eragon says, "Shall we dance, friend of my heart?" And Saphira answers, "We shall, little one." Just started bawling, which we love, but also the fact that Homie was 21 when this was published is baffling. I can feel a lot of like self-insert in here. Which is so valid. Christopher Paolini was a kid when he was writing these and like thinking them out, so it makes sense that there's a lot of self-insert. There was even a moment of like, I was sitting here just like, is Christopher Paolini a vegetarian or a vegan? Because this argument feels like it's coming straight from the mouth of a vegan. And I will say, there was a moment near the end where Eragon gets really mad because he finds out who his dad is, and because he was raised by his uncle. And then he kind of thinks to himself and he's like, no, like, this person is not my father. He may have been the reason I'm alive, but like, he's not. The people that raised me are my father. And as someone who, you may not know, I am adopted, and it grinds my gears anytime someone in any fiction or media or anything says that someone who raised them is not their real parent because they're not blood tied. And I'm like, absolutely fucking not. They raised you. That makes you more of a parent than blood. And so it grinds my gears every time. So I'm really glad that Eragon didn't do that in here. And he's come across so many more father figures in the span of these 2 books that, like, of course, there's more father figures out there for him. I will say my previous comment about his scar being healed with magic, I'm so sad that it happened, because to me, it's a cop-out when disability is healed with magic. But I see what Christopher Paolini did. He didn't make it easy on Eragon. He did make Eragon train for months without healing his back and going through that pain and honing his body and basically being grateful for what he has before this magic, if you will, comes in and heals him and transforms him into something that he will eventually be completely as a writer, but like wouldn't have been for many, many years. And I think that's very interesting of a choice, because it almost fell into the trope that, I don't know, like, it really bothers me when a main character of a YA series just gets everything handed to them and they find everything really easy and they're like the shining golden star of everything that they do, that they try without really any hardship because they're the special snowflake of a character, you know? Really bothers me.
Like, I need the characters to work for what they do. I think it was really interesting of Christopher Paolini to decide to put Eragon through so much and then give him that easy way out. And then even after we got that easy way out and we were like reading about how much better Eragon is at so many different things, just when I was starting to get the taste of like, this is a little bit of like an easy cop-out thing, right? He slides this in where he like tries to do something else, and then there's a statement like Eragon even knows, like, even though he's much better at a lot of things, he still has something to work towards, because if he didn't, like, what would he do then? Like, what kind of purpose he would have? And I'm like, that's actually really nice. Like, there's a lot of really self-awareness in these books that, honestly, I never would have thought that a teenage young adult man writing these books would be able to put into books, you know? Would be able to even know in himself at that age. So I think it's an absolute wonderful, wonderful book. It's not a masterpiece in any way, but it was so good. And I think Christopher Paolini really did a fantastic job with it. You guys know, I always have issues with second books in series, especially trilogies, even though this is 4 books, so maybe it's a little bit of a different thing with 4 books. Especially trilogies, second books always grind my gears because they always... Apparently I'm picking that saying up again. Oh god, that's something from back when I was in high school. Second books often to me just act as a vessel to get to the final act of book 3. They don't act as their own story. But I think what this one did, and like a really good second book does, is they take everything that we've learned and that we know from book 1 and then introduce something that kind of turns everything on its head. Not that the first book was wrong and it completely eliminates everything from the first book, but that it makes everything leveled up and it makes the stakes even higher. In here, we get to see Eragon's like training montage essentially over the entire length of the book, basically. Like a good solid 80% of it is training, mixed in with Roran, his cousin, fighting for Carvajal and doing all the things for the woman he loves. And then we also get to see Naswada. I always forget that we get to see a little bit of Naswada's point of view, the queen, or not the queen, the leader of the Varden. We get to see her, and she's so badass and she's so cool. And there's a lot of things going on. Like, I am so shocked that Christopher Paolini, who, again, I keep saying it, he's so young when he wrote these books. And that's not to say that I'm dissing on any younger writers. I just think that there is something that comes with time and experience and lots and lots of practice with your writing, right? Like when you're in high school and you release a book like Christopher Paolini was, maybe he wasn't in high school, but he was 15, right? When he wrote Eragon for the first time, when he was working on it. When I was a teenager, I did not have this amount of prowess in my writing. I wrote all the time. I was trying to craft stories all the time. I don't know, like it's baffling to me that someone of that age would have this level of skill. And maybe that's just my own ignorance. But I think like experience and honing one's craft makes you a better writer. So I'm actually really interested to see how his writing differs in Murtagh. I want to see how Christopher Paolini's writing has changed. Really enjoyed this. This was a fantastic reread. Almost like brand new reading it because your girl forgot so many things. Hello, beautiful people. I am halfway through Brisingr. Feckin' finally. I have waxed poetic in every vlog that I've mentioned this book in about the inability of Apple books to go faster than 2 times speed in an audiobook, which is an interesting learning experience for me because, as I've said multiple times, I just these audiobooks are so slow for me because this almost 800 page, 750 page fantasy book is taking, God, like 13-14 hours. The audiobook is taking at 2 times speed. Like, it's taking so long. And I'm used to reading fantasies, especially big chunky fantasies, within 5-6 hours. Because I can usually pump up the speed of the audiobook to my actual reading speed. And when I'm locked in tandem reading it, which is what I usually do, I read with the audiobook in my ears and the book in my hands, my eyes on the page. It double focuses me in. I am locked in. I'm getting the story in the best way I can get. I am living it. I am breathing it. And I'm just consuming it at such a fast speed. I think because I've been forced to take these books slower, it's making me simultaneously annoyed at how slow it's going, but also making me realize how much I have relied on that fast consumption of books. Does that make any sense? I don't know. It's like a weird internal thought of mine that I've had while reading these books, is that I want to just consume it at top speed, but these books are forcing me to go slower and forcing me to just kind of sit in the story and enjoy it a little bit more, or just like sit in it a little more. I think what's also bothering me is that Brisingr specifically, because it didn't bother me as much with Eragon at all. It really didn't bother me with Eragon, the speed of these audiobooks. Eldest a little more so because it was a little bigger, but it less so than it is with Brisingr. This book is slow. Like the plot of it is slow because we are sitting with Eragon at the beginning of this book. He chooses to do a few things, which I will talk about in a second, that I don't think line up with his character very well. So it was a very confusing start to the book because it didn't feel like the other two books as so far. And it felt right off the top that Christopher Paolini, because he decided to make this a 4-book series and not a 3-book series, at the end of Eldest, in the acknowledgement section, he's still talking about it as a trilogy. But in this one, he talks about how he realized and how he was very happy about the fact that he got to treat this as a saga, as 4 books instead of 3, because it allowed him to slow down and really get the characters to where they needed to be by the end of Inheritance, the last book, to properly tell the story, which I totally love. I love the fact that he got to do that, because I have read many different series and duologies and trilogies that felt really rushed in the end because they just weren't given the space to tell the whole story that they needed to in the way that they wanted to. But this is slow. Like, this is a slow churning book. I still don't know the plot of this. I kind of explained this in my Friends Pick My TBR, that vlog, where like Eragon, the plot of the book Eragon, it's a quest novel, so we knew what we were getting into. And also in Eldest, we have the paired POVs of like the more action-packed Carvajal and Varden narratives mirroring the slow churning learning narrative that Eragon is going through in Elis Mira, the training montage, if you will. So at least with Eldest, we kind of knew like there was a end point to this, because Eragon not only had to get over his own mental blocks and had to learn all this new stuff about being a dragon rider in a very short, concise time, because he wasn't allowed to like be raised as a rider properly. He has to get it all as fast as he can so that he can be ready to help the Varden when the war comes. And then you see the Varden and the Carvajal narratives with Roran and Naswada. Their narratives are moving forward towards this war. So you're getting the movement of that narrative with Eldest. But this one, we are now in the war. And my God, does it feel like a war, because it's so nothing. Like there isn't something moving this forward. It's not like they're trying to find a weapon to help them, or they're not trying to find out information about something. They're just kind of sitting there waiting for the war. You know, at least to the point that I'm at. I'm halfway through. And we get a little bit of movement because like at the beginning, Roran and Eragon are going to find Katrina, who's been taken by the Razak. And then that's like the culmination of the Razak problem. And it was over really quickly. And then there were some choices made by Eragon and by the narrative that didn't feel like Eragon. Like, it just didn't feel right. Like, the choices that were made at the beginning of this did not feel like Eragon did at the end of Eldest. And this starts only 4 days after the end of Eldest. So it felt like Eragon just like kind of aged 6 months in 4 days, was making choices that weren't really matching his character. Like, the choices that he made with Katrina's father, Sloane, felt like they weren't needed at all in the beginning of this book. So I don't know why Christopher Paolini chose to have Eragon do that. Like, I get it kind of spurs on a few conversations between Arya and Eragon later in the book, or at least in the part that I've read, where Arya is like, you should have just killed him. Why did you show him why did you do what you did? And which is what I was thinking too. So I don't know what Christopher is doing with that. So I'm very interested to see what he does with that. Like, is he setting up Sloane to be something later in Brisingr or in Inheritance? Like, is that man gonna come back? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, I think what's really bothering me is it's such a loose end that has nothing to do with what's happening in these books at this point, that it's bothering me because, one, it doesn't feel like Eragon's character to pick that. Eragon is a rash boy. Like, he makes choices based on the moment and the feelings that he's in the middle of. And yeah, he sometimes thinks them through, but he does what's best for the people. He does what's best for himself and Saphira and like what he thinks is going to move things forward. And this one didn't make any sense to me because he puts so much emotion in front of the choice rather than doing it the way he usually. I don't know why. I don't know why this felt so weird to me, because like it does make sense still that he would have chosen to do. It makes like a little bit of sense because of the way that like Christopher's setting him up to be this like more moral person. He must have learned something in Eldest that set him up to be a better person. I don't really know what Christopher's doing with Eragon's character at the beginning of this. I didn't really like it. I didn't like the beginning of this. It felt a little pointless. Then, of course, Eragon's like journey back and Arya just kind of finds him and they're fine. Like nothing really happens to Eragon on the way in. Like he doesn't learn anything. He doesn't figure out anything. He's just running. And then he comes back to the barn and everything's like fine. I don't understand the beginning of this. I really don't. So maybe there's more to it that I'm just not seeing yet, but I don't know. Anyways, back at the Varden. It's kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie. Like I am liking this because it feels like just lovely and nostalgic to be in, but I want something to be happening to be pushing the story forward a little bit, because right now they're just in waiting mode. Like, yeah, there was the wedding that they had that was interrupted by the new writer and the feckin' weirdly enchanted soldiers. So like there is a threat, but they're just waiting for the threat. Like nothing is moving in this book for me. And I think that's what's bothering me. And that's what's taking me so long to get through it, is because I'm not feeling a pull to pick up this book other than the fact that I have to finish it for videos. That's the only reason I would be picking up this book right now, which is so sad to say because I really, really enjoyed Eragon and Eldest. So I'm hoping that the second half of this book goes quicker because I'm trying to finish it today. I got my earphone in, I'm sitting at work, I'm about to start editing and compiling a bunch of content for a magazine at work. And I'm just going to listen to this. I'm just going to listen to this as I go through. I'm going to let myself feel the story from here on out. And I have 8 hours left on the audiobook and I'm going to try finish it today. 8 hours of listening to this book today. I'm going to hopefully do it. It's 1:30 because I need to get my Friends Pick My TBR vlog up today or tomorrow. I need to. I don't have anything else planned. For the past 2 weeks, I have been pulling concepts out of nothing, out of my friend's recommendation, and then like a later video that was supposed to go up later this year that I was like, I guess I could film that in like a quick succession because this video needs to go up. Anyways, not this video. This video, the series video, I could put that up whenever I want because it wasn't a planned video. I will let you know how I feel about Brisingr when I get to the end of it, but I am enjoying this book, counter to my rant that I just went on. I am enjoying it. It is slower, more churning, more nostalgic fantasy. I think I'm just missing what this specific book's center plot is. I just need a little bit more movement. So maybe in the second half we'll get more movement. Hello, beautiful friends. It is now 8 hours later. It is almost 10:30 at night. I'm about to edit my Friends Pick My TBR video that I needed to finish today because it's Thursday and I need to get it up for tomorrow. But it's finally done. God, get it off my plate. Stop thinking about it. Oh my gosh, golly. It's officially done. And you know what that means? That it's officially done? Finish Brisingr. What a read, truly. What a read. I think my thoughts from before do still stand about it being a definite slower read than I was anticipating. It didn't really have that much of a point or a direction that it was going, but I was at the halfway point. So of course, as soon as I picked it back up, things started kicking into gear again. And it's the halfway point, so a lot of things are changing and moving and growing. And of course, we had more direction after that. And I really did enjoy the second half of this book with the return to Eldest, going to coronation for the dwarves and seeing Oric again. That was lovely. And genuinely seeing overall in this book, it's been very interesting to see specifically like the consequences to a lot of Eragon's choices in the first two books. I think it was very important and very interesting as to what we got to see with that, because it does lend more weight to these choices that Eragon is doing rather than just saying yes to everybody around him and agreeing to things, which he did very early on in his journey. He was swearing oaths to people left and right, and this is really the culmination of like what that really means for him and the politics in this world as a dragon rider who's trying to do the best he can for his entire world, right? I think it was really interestingly done. I think this book is definitely a feat in the levels that Christopher Paolini is going to bring about the story and also the interconnectedness of the politics in the world. I'm really happy about the Brisingr thing. I'm so happy about Eragon getting his sword. Oh, I'm so pleased by it. I think it would have been pretty good as well as if he could have found his father's sword, but I like that he got to make his own sword. I think that was a very good part in this book because I have a thing for weapons. I love it so much. I want there to be magical weapons in like every book that I write, which is very difficult when you're writing just cozy fantasy. So there haven't been any magical weapons yet, but if you pay close enough attention in a second story, Finn's blades his 2 daggers are beautifully wrought little weapons. I love them so much. But yeah, so that was definitely a really lovely part in this, and finding out more about Eragon and his father and his mother was also really, really nice. And I really like the way that it was done. I like the way that it was gently handled and also given to him by Ormus and Glader. But yeah, that the occurrence of him needing a sword throughout this entire book, basically. Like, it's literally a chapter in here that says, I need a sword, which is near the beginning, and he ends up getting like a basic falchion from one of the swordsmith with the Varden, I think, or with Carvajal, something like that, but like with the people there. And it doesn't really work for him. Like, it works, but not enough, and it ends up breaking because it's not strong enough to withstand the fights that riders go through. So I think it was really interesting and neat to see how much Eragon like tested different weapons, and then also like trying to find something that he could do, like just reworking the nature of his knuckles to make it look more like what some of the dwarves have done, and like added like armor into his knuckle, like into the bones of his knuckles, so he could like physically fight and still like have weapons on him even if he didn't have arms on him, you know? And I think, I don't know, like I find it such an interesting transformation for Eragon throughout this book, is getting not only the effects of what happens to him at the end of Eldest or not necessarily the end of Eldest, but like what happens to him with the blessing of the dragons, right? And like his physical change, that making him something in between human and elf, and then his choice to add in something that is quite dwarvish is very interesting to me. And I think it's so cool that he's kind of become this figure that sits in between all 3 of the races, because he's so lonely and he is so revered and ostracized, and as a figure, as a dragon rider. I don't know, I think it's so cool what Christopher Paolini is doing with the transformation of Eragon in this book. I still question his choices at the beginning, though. That still doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel right. Maybe it'll make sense in the next one with Inheritance, but we shall see, I guess, when I get there. And I also guess we're gonna meet, is this Galbatorix's boy? Because we haven't yet met a green dragon. We've now met a blue, a red, and a gold, but we have not yet met a green dragon. Is this Galbatorix's dragon? That'd be really cool, because I don't think it would be the last egg that has yet to hatch. I feel like that's not going to come into play. I can't believe, like, this whole timeline of the books has been like 8-9 months. Like, that's bananas, man. It's such a wildly short timeline for so much to happen. Oh my goodness me. But wow, yeah. I did really enjoy this, but I don't think it's my favorite. I still like Eragon and Eldest more than this one. What an interesting one. I think that the culmination of that story, I did see coming. It was one of the things that I guessed. Fate of Glader and Ormus was something that I guessed. I think I guessed it back when we were introduced to them. I was like, yeah, no, there's no way. There's no way that they're going to make it to the end of the series. But, which is terrible to say. But you ever just meet characters in books and be like, oh yeah, you're just here so that you can die. Because that's what it was to me. This is book number 32, I think. I gotta write all my thoughts down in my book journal, and I gotta edit this video. But yeah, done with Brisingr. I think I'm gonna take a break from these books for a little bit and then come back to Inheritance when I want to start it. But I gotta say, I'm pretty intrigued now. I want to see how this series ends, because I've really enjoyed it so far. Like, there's something so wonderfully nostalgic about these books, and so beautiful about the way that Christopher Paolini is writing them and crafting them,
And to see his uptick in talent with each one of these books is really incredible. But at the same time, still seeing the storycraft that was there in book 1 coming into fruition, and like the whole wraparound, and like the world just keeps expanding, and I'm like, you can tell how much Christopher Paolini had planned before he even published book 1. Like, you can tell how much work he has put into this world. I am really enjoying these books. Hello, friends. It's been a hot second since I have talked to you in this vlog. We are officially finishing this series. I have been listening to this and reading this all day as I've been working on a crochet project that just went very south for the past half hour, so I've been trying to remedy the very southness of it. It's been literally 7 hours and 47 minutes that I've been reading this so far, and I'm on chapter The City of Sorrows, and I'm on page 571. What are my thoughts about this conclusion? I'm enjoying it, but I think I have very similar feelings about this one that I do to Brisingr. Because of the way that Brisingr was structured, it didn't really have much of a driving forward plot, like this is the hook of the story type of a plot. And so I'm like, this one, like, it's not like it feels like aimless or anything. It is wrapping up all these plot points and questions and ideas that were raised and little things that have happened in Eragon's journey that are now coming back to be tied into a nice little bow. It is also a war novel, again, like Brisingr, but less so than Brisingr. This one has a little bit more going for it. If I remember correctly, I did talk about, it's been a while, it's August now. I started this video in fucking February. I can't believe I'm finishing it now, but we're finishing it. I mentioned that in Brisingr, there is a sense of aimlessness to a war novel. And then at the end of Brisingr, when Eragon finally like has a little bit more, maybe in the last like 40%, has a little bit more of purpose. He's doing things, he's trying to move things along. Then he gets his sword and he makes his sword. He's gathering a weapon to like go into this final battle. And he's still learning all these things. That one had, like, at the end, it had more of an aim and a goal. This one, I think, does have more of an aim and a goal throughout the entire thing. It is not only this war novel, this churning to the end of this unending war that they're going through. It's a trying to find an upper hand on this enemy that they're facing. And not only Galbatorix, but Murtagh as well, right? They're trying to find, not like knowingly like seeking something out when they're trying to find a way to like have the upper hand over Murtagh, but with Eragon and with what's happening in this plot, he is learning things and gaining more tools and knowledge to help him in this end battle that up until this point there's no way that he would have won. And I think what Christopher Paolini is doing, now that I'm coming to the end and I'm seeing the entire series as a whole, I think it's absolutely fascinating what he has done in crafting the character of Eragon and his arc, and also like his story in like the narrative sense and in the plot sense, because not just like in the overarching plot of all 4 books, because this was originally supposed to be a trilogy, as I mentioned in this video. When he got to Brisingr, he realized it was too big and then wrote both Brisingr and Inheritance, which Inheritance is over 800 pages. So my man had a lot of story in him, and he knew that he needed the time that Brisingr and Inheritance would give him to properly finish out this story, which I think is so good and really, really, I'm so glad that his publisher let him have this, because in one of the other book series that I did for this series, the She Who Became the Sun, the Shining Emperor or whatever, the Sun Emperor, is that what it's called? I don't remember what that duology is called, but the second book in that one, it should have been a trilogy. It should have been split into 3, because the speed in which we finished that book series up, there's so much missing in that second book, and it's just too fast. And you don't have enough time to actually sit with the characters, grow with the characters, and learn all that kind of stuff. The fact that Christopher Paolini was allowed to do that back in 2006 or whenever when this was published is phenomenal. And I think he did an incredible job with it, because I still thinking, I know I have this much left of this book. I was thinking about what Eragon did at the beginning of Brisingr what he did with Katrina's father. I still think that that choice was incredibly out of character for Eragon. Still, even where we are now, I still think that that choice of his was so out of character. It doesn't make sense to me that that happened. So removing that, everything else about Eragon's story makes sense to me. The arc that we've gone on, and the fact that in story structure itself, the structuring of a hero type journey like this, a quest in the 11th hour, right? You are gathering these tools that you need, you're gathering characters that you, or other people that you need, you're gathering the support, you're gathering the troops, right? That is a big literary trope that we have in structuring books. You're gathering the troops, you're arming the troops, you're getting ready for this big battle, right? And I think what Christopher has done with Brisingr and this one so far, because I know we have like the actual end battle to deal with, he has done that aspect of growth in Eragon, of the learning of new lore, of learning about new skills. Still, even though in Eldest, Eragon was like, that was his learning book, right? That was the montage of him in Eldest with his master. Like, that was the learning book. And then we have Roran as he's coming into his own as like the war hero, right? I'm fascinated by the way that Christopher Paolini has constructed this series. These books are not perfect by any means. Like, the beginning of this book had me rolling my eyes in a few moments because it just felt so like, some characters have plot armor. I have to remind myself that this was a younger reader's book. But then again, we're getting like full ass torture scenes in here. And I'm like, this is a fucking children's book? And we're watching Queen Naswada get fucking tortured and then get gaslit by Galbatorix. And poor Murtagh has gone through so much abuse and so much mental anguish, and he has no faith in his ability to be freed of this. And that is so genuinely sad. Like, I am so interested to read Murtagh now because I need to know. I gotta know his story. Because what, like, the little bits we're getting in this with him and Naswada, and he's like trying to be there for her and trying to help her in whatever little way he can because of all the oaths and the magic that he's tied up in. It's so painful, and I'm just like, this is a kid's book? Like, what the fuck? Like, it's insane. And I'm really, really, really interested to see how well Christopher does this ending, because so far this book has been very good. It's not a perfect book by any means. There's a couple issues with like actual craft of the writing, and I just have to remind myself that Christopher was like, what, a fucking teenager when he was dreaming up these books. And he originally self-published Eragon itself, and Eldest, maybe just the first one, and that's how he was discovered. He was a self-published pickup. They were doing it back then too. Who knew? They found out that he was like a 15-year-old kid, and his parents were his editors, and his parents are like professors and like of the English variety of some kind. Knopf, Doubleday, picked up his books, and he became the sensation that he did, and that's absolutely phenomenal. And the fact that he's returning to the series and returning to the world now, because I think, didn't we get an announcement that we're getting more since Murtagh is out? Like, he's announced that he's writing more in this world, which I think is so cool. I would like to make a request to the universe. If we get an Angela story, I will be the most happy person, because who the fuck is Angela? Like, are we gonna find out in this last chunk here, or is this just a mystery of the universe? Like, what's her deal? Why is she so powerful? What's her deal? You know, I want to know, because she seems like the perfect kooky little witch that I just want to know everything about. I think it's my third favorite of the series so far. Definitely Eragon first, and then Eldest, and then this one, and then Brisingr. Because I think it's definitely really difficult to write a war book and to have that extended drudgery of war. And I was listening to, I haven't mentioned this podcast and on my channel in a while, I was listening to Writing About Dragons and Shit with B. Dave and Aaron M. Evans and Trevor Bettis. They were answering a question from one of their viewers about writing extended battle sequences. And one of their recommendations and comments was to make it very personal, to be focused on the personal in these moments. Because if you zoom out too much, everyone just looks like ants. And we have a tendency to want to zoom out like that because it's very cinematic, and we have movies and TV shows in our head, and we want to show it out, like show it all cinematically, but the way to make people care is to go for the personal. Like, we can see a scene, as they use it as an example in the podcast episode, we can see a scene of, like, a wave crashing through and, like, flipping cars and all this kind of stuff, like, big drama. But it's a whole other thing to see a mother trying to pull her child out of the car as it's being pulled away, right? Like, it's pulling on the personal. And I know he's kind of on the outs because of his views on Palestine, but, like, at this point, what fucking author isn't? But in Percy Jackson, in the 5th book of the original series, The Last Olympian, Rick does such an incredible job of writing that final book, because that entire book is a battle. It's the Battle of New York, right? It's the whole book, and you're never bored, and you're never exhausted with the battle. So writing an extended battle is so difficult. And the fact Christopher Paolini has written an extended battle for 2 books that are both over 700 pages long is saying something. And I will say Brisingr wasn't it wasn't super well done. This one is much better done because we are focusing on the little moments. I will say there are moments in here that are completely useless to anything at all. In my opinion, like it's including bits like seeing King Oric making a stone by the river at literally no point. Like, there's a lot of scenes in here where the scenes aren't doing anything, which I think could have benefited from a little trimming, from a little editing, just to keep the story moving in those moments. Otherwise, I think Christopher's doing a good job of balancing that ever-churning drudgery of war. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm gonna sink back into this, and I'll let you know how I feel.
And this, my friends, is why for the longest time I was so scared of finishing series as a kid. Because it just makes you hyperventilate. Really makes me hyperventilate a little bit. I understand why Christopher ended it that way, but fuck if that's not the saddest, most bittersweet ending. Okay. I need to pull it's literally 3 a.m. I read this entire book in one day. Oh my god, I've been reading for like 11 hours straight. I finished an 800-page fantasy novel and I can't breathe. What the fuck is wrong with me? I'm so sorry you have to see this. Anyways, let me just... I think I need to sleep on this. I need to sleep on it. I need to pull myself together. I'm laughing at myself. Not at the book. Because shit, was that bittersweet. Alright, friends. We've made it! It's officially August 18th. We've made it to the end of this video. Y'all, what a time to be alive. We've officially finished the entire inheritance cycle. I am still reeling from last night, but I have so many more thoughts. What a time. There's one quote in here that I wanted to share with y'all. I dog-eared it and highlighted it. It's like literally the only thing I highlighted in this entire book. There's this quote from Saphira, and she says, "When have we ever had any choice but to go forward?" A girly just encapsulated the entire series in one sentence. Like, they never stop. We did it. We came to the end of the inheritance cycle. We've had such a journey, y'all, because I started this back in February when my friend Hannah picked Brisingr as my friends picked my TBR book. So in my mind, I was like, great, I don't remember a single thing from Eragon or Eldest, so I need to reread those to go forward with the series. And if I'm gonna do that, I might as well do a series video. So I did, and I ended up rereading these beautiful old copies of Eragon and Eldest, which also set me off on a journey to try and find these versions of the next 2 books, to only realize that they don't exist. This version of the paperback, because once Brisingr came out, they did like a revamp. So that's why there's only ever these 2 books in this old copy. My beautiful friend Sophie, her mom found this entire box set in their small town, and I literally am so fucking happy. It was $8, guys. $8 for these 4 books. I've never been happier in my life because they all match. They're all the beautiful hardcovers that I wanted. What a journey. I need to wrap my brains around this because now that I've finished this journey with Inheritance, I have such a beautiful, wonderful glow when I think of this whole series. That doesn't happen often. In my journeys as to actually finishing series, I have come across many books that were like fairly decent endings. I've also come across books that once reading the final book, it cast a negative light on the entire series because of how bad the last book was. I'm looking at you, the Poppy War series. Then every so once in a while, even one of the series that I read that was just part of a weekend vlog, I read the entirety of the Katie Rose Poole An Age of Darkness trilogy. Reading that one made me realize that some series you need all 3, the entire thing, all in one go to get the whole story and to feel satisfied. And so that gave me different insight on some different series in that way and things like that. But then every so often you come across a series like this. The way that it ends, even though this ended so bittersweet and it broke my soul, and Christopher Paolini and I are on thin ice with the choice that he made, but he made that choice in book 1. This whole series is so wonderfully plotted, not well paced. There's a lot of things that could be edited down in these books. There's a lot of things that were unnecessary. There's a lot of repetition in some of the character moments, and there's a lot of moments that just had just were useless to the storyline, and choices that were made, i.e. at the beginning of Brisingr, that just made me fucking mad. And that did come back. The Katrina's father thing came back in Inheritance at the very end, and I thought Eragon was gonna write what he did. He did not. He stayed in that like cruel heart of what he did at the beginning of this, and it just doesn't feel right to Eragon as a character through the journey that he goes through. Like, that choice does not feel right to me. I think that overall, this entire story, I was talking about it earlier in my update for Inheritance, the way that Christopher has plotted this entire thing out. I remember on my journey of trying to find the paperbacks of these 2 that matched the paperbacks that I had, I found a interview of when Brisingr was coming out, an interview with Christopher, and that's where I found out that they did the redesign of the paperbacks. He talked about how, one, Eragon was originally self-published. He was like 15 and he got his parents to edit it because his parents were professors. I think that's just so sweet. But when he was writing this as a child, he had the entire story and the entire world mapped out before he became traditionally published. Like, he had it all. He had it set in stone, which is so interesting to me because of the way that this was originally planned to be a trilogy. It was supposed to be just 3 books. But if you read the author's note in the back of this, or the acknowledgements in the back of Brisingr, it explains that when he went to go write Brisingr, he realized how much more space he needed for these characters and how much more time and pages that he needed to get this story right. And I'm so glad that his publishers allowed him to do that, because I honestly don't know how he would have ended it. I don't think it would have been nearly as satisfying. It let him play with these characters. And I was talking to Lindsay earlier, Lindsay Puckett, and she was saying that one of her theories is like, one of her thought processes that she was talking about with a friend of hers is that like the tone switch between these 2 books, Eldest and Brisingr, is so much more adult that she almost hopes that whatever Christopher does with the rest of the series and whatever he's doing next in this series becomes more fully adult, because his trajectory in these 2 books definitely didn't feel like children's books anymore. Like, there were scenes in Inheritance that had me gasping as someone who is totally fine with body gore and doesn't get triggered by literally anything. I was shocked that the amount of torture and gaslighting in this book was in this book for a children's story. Like, the depth of these books is unreal. No, they are not perfect. As I said, they need a little bit of editing to become perfect, because there's a lot of waffling and fluff and things like that. But I think there is such a charm to this series, to this beautiful children's series, that it's not even a children's series, just a general, like a fantasy series as a whole. There's such a charm to it, because it has that nostalgia of older fantasy like Lord of the Rings. You can tell that he put his heart and soul into planning this world and fleshing it out and playing in Allegasia and the lore of it. And I just know that man has an encyclopedia or two full of lore of Allegasia and then the world beyond Allegasia. So I'm so excited to see what else he creates in this world, because I know he said somewhere that he was coming out with something more, right? Because Murtagh was the start of something else. Like, I think it's a standalone book on its own, but it's like Lindsay was calling it a bridge book to whatever he's doing next. So I'm excited to see what else Christopher does. There was some wisdom in these pages that I did not have at the age of 15. I don't even have now. Like, the pain and the agony of some of the things that these characters go through is so real. And I'm so stunned that a teenager could pull that together. You know? I don't know. I could talk about these books forever. But yes, Inheritance specifically, the ending pissed me off in the only way that a really good ending can do. It was long. It was a little drawn out. The actual like climactic moment happened. It was insane. It was intense. I'm really glad how Christopher like pulled it all together and how that ending did come about for like the win for everyone and the Varden and all that. It was just a lot of explaining what would happen next and what happens right after the battle, and giving Eragon that time to settle into his new life. But he doesn't even settle. He's so restless at the end of this book that like giving him that space that we don't like end it with the battle and then it's like, what comes next? We don't know. Christopher takes the time to really show us what comes next for these characters in the few months that come after this, and the decisions that Eragon and Saphira make for his future and for the future of the Dragon Riders. I think it was really well done, even though that one decision that was literally laid out in the first book that I was like, I remember reading that quote of Angela's prophecy, and I was like, no, I don't want to believe that. No. Like, there's going to be a different way to skirt around this prophecy. Like, there has to be a different way to skirt around it, because I just don't want to believe this. Because usually when you have prophecies in books, people take it too literally, and then it's not literally what they think is going to happen. So like, it's some other way around it. So I was hoping that was kind of the case, but you can't really get around that prophecy of you will leave and you will never come home. And that hurts, because the goodbyes at the end of Inheritance killed me. Absolutely killed me, because they, one, don't make sense to me. Because Eragon has gone through so much. He's only 16 at the end of this book. He's now a dragon rider. He's basically immortal. This man can do whatever the fuck he wants. He also has a dragon, so he can fly wherever he wants. So the idea that he is set on never coming back to Allegasia, I don't believe it. I don't believe it, even though it's in a prophecy and he himself fully believes that he's never coming home and he doesn't ever want to come home. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. Like, you are 16 years old. You're gonna live your entire life on this new, okay, what? So that I'm a little angry about, but that's why I was crying so hard, because also it's the end of a series. We've come to the end of it. It's the emotional release of that. And then it's this capturing of how realistic it is to have a goal from the beginning and to achieve it and then have no idea what you're going to do next. Like, the growth and the change of the relationships in here, from like with Arya and Eragon specifically in the first book, where it's basically like a little boy's crush on his babysitter type of vibe, where like the babysitter's like, don't even look at me, to mutual respect and this deep everlasting love for each other, but knowing it's never gonna happen. It just hurts. And then having Murtagh as a character, Murtagh makes me so emotional. He's so abused, and he gives up in this narrative so early, and it's just seeing that inside of him having given up is just painful. And then there's characters like Angela, that I want to know everything about Angela, and we don't get any answers. I need an entire Angela book, thank you. And we need more lore on the Weircats. We need, like, I want more. I'm just rambling now, but this was a fabulous journey. I am so glad that I decided to do this, but we did it, friends. We officially finished the entire Eragon Inheritance cycle. I am befuddled, bamboozled. I can see myself rereading the first book a lot. I also ranked these books in my brain earlier. Did I mention that in this video? I think I did. My ranking is still the same. I don't know if I rated Eldest. What did I rate Eldest? So I rated Eragon 4 stars. I rated Eldest 4 stars. And then Brisingr was 3.5. And then I'm coming out of this rating Inheritance 4.5 stars. But my favorite is Eragon. Second favorite is Eldest. And then third favorite is Inheritance. My enjoyment of each of them is different from my rating of each of them. Do you guys, like, that's a weird thing to say, but that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I need to fill in this last chunk of my bullet journal page for Inheritance now that I'm finished it, but that's a wrap on the Inheritance cycle. Let me know down below if there's any other series you want me to dabble in, if you want me to do just a regular series vlog of where I read an entire series in that vlog, whether it's brand new to me or not, whether we follow the series formula of rereading the first one and continuing on, let me know, because I'd be more than happy to find out. Anyways, friends, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.